pushed further into physical territory before Bart's cool, unbothered reaction undercut the moment for laughs. Brooks has since said in retrospect that he may have overcorrected, that he wanted to push further and then pulled back at the last moment, worried the joke would be misread. In one conversation, he admitted, in essence, that he simply got nervous. Whether or not those specific scenes would have improved the film, their existence says something about what Brooks was actually trying to do. This wasn't provocation for its own sake. It was an attempt to strip away Hollywood's polite storytelling conventions and expose racism as an absurd, fear-driven belief system rather than a subject to tiptoe around. The scenes that made the final cut are remembered for their audacity. The ones left on the cutting room floor show just how far Brooks was willing to go before he stopped himself. Blazing Saddles is also responsible for one of the most famous gags in film comedy, the campfire scene where cowboys eat beans and audibly break wind. Reportedly the first time a major studio film had ever included a flatulence joke with full sound. Brooks didn't just keep the scene. He expanded it in post-production after test audiences laughed so hard they missed the next line of dialogue. It wasn't simple toilet humor to him. It was a direct assault on decades of Hollywood myth-making about cowboys as stoic, clean-cut heroes. Brooks wanted audiences to see them instead as sweaty, unglamorous men living in the dirt. Warner Brothers executives reportedly called the scene vulgar and pointless. Brooks kept it anyway, and became one of the more quietly revolutionary moments in mainstream comedy. That same appetite for chaos shows up in the film's climactic brawl, which spills from the fictional Rock Ridge set onto the actual Warner Brothers studio lot. As the cast runs to the gate into the surrounding street, an ordinary passerby, not an extra, not part of production, wanders directly into frame. Rather than cut the shot, Brooks reportedly told the crew to leave it in because it was funny. That anonymous bystander, confused and completely unaware he was being filmed, ended up as an accidental permanent fixture of the movie. Brooks built much of his directing style around encouraging exactly this kind of unpredictability. He let actors improvise and break character when it served the scene. Gene Wilder's loose, offhand delivery as the Waco Kid often diverged from the written script. Cleveland Little brought dry reactions and comedic instincts that weren't necessarily on the page. Madeline Kahn improvised several of her most memorable moments as Lily Von Stupp, including her breathy musical number. Perhaps the clearest example of that philosophy is the flashback scene featuring Yiddish-speaking Native American warriors. In a childhood memory sequence, Bart's family is surrounded by warriors on horseback until the tribal chief, played by Brooks himself, begins speaking not in invented movie Indian language but in fluent Yiddish, complete with other warriors nodding along. The joke lands because it's so unexpected, but it also functions as pointed commentary on how Westerns historically reduce native characters to faceless, undifferentiated threats rarely given any real language or humanity at all. The same layered irony runs through the film's opening theme song. Blazing Saddles is performed with complete sincerity by Frankie Laine, a veteran Western vocalist known for delivering emotionally serious ballads. Brooks reportedly kept Laine in the dark about the fact that he was recording for a comedy, letting him treat the song as though it belonged in a dramatic epic like High Noon. The result is a rich, powerful vocal performance paired with lyrics full of exaggerated Western cliches, sincerity colliding with absurdity to comic effect. When Warner Brothers executives first screened the finished film, the reaction was reportedly stone silence. No laughter, no applause. One executive is said to have called it too vulgar for American audiences. Another allegedly predicted it would end careers. Brooks, however, held something the studio couldn't override: Final Cut Authority written into his contract, meaning Warner Brothers legally cannot alter or censor the film without his approval. For most directors, that kind of control is a dream. For a nervous studio watching a film break nearly every convention of the genre, it became a serious problem. According to industry accounts, Warner Brothers head Ted Ashley wanted the film released quietly in a handful of cities, and then pull without fanfare, a common strategy for movies the studio had little faith in, allowing them to either fail unnoticed or shift blame onto the filmmaker if controversy erupted. Brooks, who had already challenged audience expectations once before with the producers and had sent up a Hitler, believed he had something genuinely powerful on his hands. When Blazing Saddles opened in theaters in February 1974, Warner Brothers wasn't sure whether it had a hit or a disaster on its hands. The film tore into mythology of the American Western, mocked racism directly instead of dancing around it, and closed a brawl that spills off the set entirely, breaking the fourth wall in a way few studio comedies had attempted before. It was crude, loud, and unlike anything Hollywood had greenlit, and somehow it worked. But the version audiences saw was only part of the story. Behind it sat a messier, riskier film. Scenes cut for being too extreme even by the standards of a movie built on outrage, a casting process derailed by personal crises, and a legal contract that let Mel Brooks defy his own studio. To understand why Blazing Saddles landed the way it did, it helps to remember what 1974 America actually looked like. The Vietnam War had just ended in humiliation. Watergate was unraveling in real time, with Nixon's presidency on the brink of collapse. Public trust in institutions was cratering. The civil rights movement had secured real legal victories, but everyday racism was still baked into American culture, nowhere more visibly than in the movies, where Westerns had spent decades casting white men as heroes and treating everyone else as scenery. Mel Brooks didn't set out to gently spoof that formula. He wanted to demolish it. The plot itself is simple on its face. A corrupt land developer wants to empty out the town of Rockridge so he can seize the property beneath it. And the scheme involved convincing the governor to install a black sheriff, assuming the townspeople will be so outraged they'll abandon the town themselves. Instead, the new sheriff, Bart, played by Cleveland Little, turns out to be smarter and more capable than everyone around him, and what began as a racist trick collapses into a strange, boundary-smashing revolt against both the villains and the town that rejected him. Underneath the slapstick was something genuinely dangerous for its time. The idea that racism, held up to ridicule, falls apart under its own weight. Audiences weren't accustomed to hearing racial slurs used in a comedy, even when the joke was aimed squarely at the bigots using them. They weren't used to bathroom humor in mainstream releases, and they certainly weren't used to watching a black protagonist consistently outmaneuver every white authority figure in town. Brooks didn't write the film alone. Richard Pryor, arguably the most fearless black comedian working at the time, co-wrote the script and helped mold Bart into a character who wasn't just charming and quick-witted, but fully conscious of the absurdity surrounding him. Pryor had actually been the first choice to play Bart himself, but the studio wouldn't insure him because of his history with substance issues, a decision that arguably reshaped the entire tone of the finished film. Cleveland Little, by contrast, brought a Broadway performer's polish and a dry, understated delivery. Pryor supplied the script's edge. Little gave the character his composure. The film spared no one, not racists, not politicians, not cowboys, not Hollywood itself. It rejected the notion that satire needed to be subtle, choosing instead to hit the audience directly and then mock the audience's own discomfort. That fearlessness carries all the way through to the ending, which abandons the Old West setting entirely. The cast crashes to the literal walls of the studio, spills onto other sound stages, runs to the Warner lot, and ends up at a theater screening the very film we're watching. It's one of the earliest fully self-aware endings in American comedy, a device that would later echo through films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Deadpool. Not every provocative idea Brooks and Pryor wrote actually reached the screen. The most talked about deleted material involves an extended version of the flirtation between Lily Von Stupp, played by Madeline Kahn, and Bart. In the finished film, their bedroom scene is a quick, suggestive exchange, tame compared to what was originally shot. In the longer, unreleased version, the scene continues into darkness with a risque question from Lily about a stereotype regarding black men, followed by a deadpan punchline from Bart. The joke would have combined race, sexuality, and satire in a single beat, arguably more provocative than anything that ultimately made the film. Brooks has discussed the scene in interviews, including a conversation with Conan O'Brien, explaining that it crossed from satire into something he feared would overshadow the rest of the movie, and he ultimately decided against keeping it. There were other trims as well. A suggestive line involving Lily instructing Bart to remove his gun belt, phrased so it clearly meant something else, and an early draft in which Lily's seduction of Bart